Senate Bill 5403. I am currently sharing my screen, not as a full presentation mode, but as kind of the non-presentation mode. And hopefully everyone can see that just fine. I've kind of blown it up. If I don't do it that way, then I kind of lose track of seeing all any comments in the chat. So that's why I'm doing it that way. So hopefully that is, you can view that okay. And Tierney, if you want to start the recording now, that would be great. Oh, you already did. Tierney's on it. So we're talking about implementation of Senate Bill 5403. We're holding 2 stakeholder sessions, one today and then one next Tuesday, March 24th. The same material will be presented at both of these sessions. And again, I'm Denise Laflamme with the Policy and Rules Coordinator with LCB. And if you want to reach me or any of us in the rules team, here's our email. It's rules@lcb.wa.gov. So the objective today is to obtain feedback on draft rules that we posted last week to implement and grow substitute Senate Bill 5403 related to financial interest agreements for cannabis retailers. And so just some housekeeping notes before we dive in. During the meeting, please keep in mind that we are recording these sessions, and the recordings are subject to public disclosure, and we're recording these sessions to make sure we collect all the feedback and have record of the feedback. And recordings will be posted on our rules webpage following these sessions. The Teams chat feature today is on. So written comments or questions in the chat will be saved also in the rulemaking file and are subject to public disclosure. Questions and comments in the chat may not be responded to right away, but I'll try to address them at the end of the session as time allows, or I might be able to respond to some right away. But the expectation is we'll try to get to them at the end if I don't respond to them during the session. You all are currently muted, and we will unmute you if you raise your hand to ask a question or provide a comment. We'll go ahead and unmute you. So we're going to be using the raise hand function. If you want to say something, we'll go on from there. Slides from these sessions will be posted on our website also after next week's session. So just wanted to let you know that the slides will be posted. There will be a link at the end of today's session for a short survey about your experience with today's session. We're just trying to improve these sessions. So if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to fill out that survey to help us gauge how we did today and how we might improve these, that would be awesome. And then, of course, feel free to email me and the rest of the rules team with questions or comments at rules@lcb.wa.gov. So what are we covering today? We're going to cover a review of the legislation, the rulemaking process, and our next steps. We're going to go over the draft rule language, hear from you with your questions and your comments, and then I'll present a tentative timeline at the end of today's session. So in gross, substitute Senate Bill 5403, it was passed during the 2025 legislative session, signed by the governor on May 12th of 2025. I have a link to the legislation in the slides that you'll be able to access, and I'm sure many of you have seen it, and we'll go over the language today. This legislation amends RCW 6950-325, Section 3 related to cannabis retailers licenses. As many of you are probably aware, the law took effect on January 1st of this year. And LCB has provided some information about implementation. So far, our licensing folks sent out some information in September, and then our enforcement and education folks sent out some information in February of this year. Both of those are Gov deliveries. So going into the legislation, it engrossed substitute Senate Bill 5403 amended 6950-325. This is just the language from 325, and it adds it renumbers and adds a new section. And I have slides with this language kind of larger, so we can go through that. But it just adds to that middle section of 6950-325. So under the existing section, the existing RCW, it just renumbers this first section, individual retail license, and all other persons and entities with a financial or other ownership interest in the business operating under the license are limited to, in the aggregate, to holding a collective total of not more than 5 retail licenses. And then, of course, the legislation introduces this new section where a retail licensee and all other persons or entities with a financial or other ownership interest may not enter into any management agreement under RCW 6950-331 or any agreement as referenced in RCW 6950-395, whether or not in exchange for payment that confers a financial interest across more than 5 retail cannabis licenses. And then the legislation goes on to define financial interest. It includes, but is not limited to, any sharing of profits or revenue, any assistance, coordination, or recommendation for the purchase of cannabis products, whereupon pricing is coordinated or discounted, the common use of intellectual property assets such as branding, trade names, logos, social media accounts, or websites. That continues on. Financial interest includes any operational control over the business or operational support for typical day-to-day business operations, including core business or executive functions of the retail cannabis license, any sharing or coordination of marketing and advertising efforts and or expenses, and finally, any coordinated sharing of employment or hiring decisions, including the shared employment of individuals. Whoops. So rulemaking is needed to align existing LCB rules with the new statutory requirements, to clarify any ambiguity in the law, and then to address related stakeholder concerns, including some that were raised during recent petitions within the same WAC sections that we are amending for this legislation. So the rulemaking steps completed so far, just a little review. The CR 101, the pre-proposal statement of inquiry, was filed last July. The notice was published in the Washington State Register under the Washington State Register number 25-15153 in August. The informal comment period ended in September. Draft rule language was posted on our website along with a Gov delivery announcing the stakeholder sessions in October, and we held our first set of stakeholder sessions around implementing this legislation in November. And following those sessions, We had, of course, good attendance for those sessions, and we received over 70 written comments afterwards. So the rulemaking next steps, just to orient ourselves, is we're going to use stakeholder feedback from today's session and any comments that we receive, written comments, and also next week's stakeholder session to develop proposed rules that would be included with a CR 102 filing, which we would request the board to approve. After that, we would hold a public hearing on the proposed rules. If all goes well with that, then we would request board approval to file a CR 103 with final rules, and then rules become effective 31 days after that filing. So that's kind of the next step in the process. And I do provide some tentative timelines at the end of today's session too. So for today's draft rules discussion, there are 5 wax sections that are amended. 314.55.018, 035, 050, 079, and 087. So we'll go through each of those. Here. So for today, the draft rules that were posted, all of the new language or the language that was we're proposing removing was highlighted or struck out or underlined in red font. And then when I was putting the presentation together, I realized that the red font is a little hard to read, so it is in blue today. So as we go through the draft, you'll see what section we're talking about on the left in the green box. All the edited text is in blue for our presentation today. And then also to help you follow along, if you're looking at the draft rules that were posted on our website. Actually, I should probably provide a link to that if you don't have it. Let me see if I can get that. Or maybe Kevin, would you mind posting a link to the draft rules in the website?
No problem. I was just about to post it here.
Okay, thank you. I should have done that at the beginning. Sorry about that. I imagine many of you have already been looking at it, but if not, let's provide that link for you in the chat. But down here in the right corner, as we go through the slides, you'll see what pages the language that I'm talking about is on. So, because there's quite a few pages in the draft rules. Okay, so that's kind of orientation of how we're taking you through the language. Okay, so let's start out with the first one is WAC 314.55.018, that's prohibited practices. We add some new language at the beginning, no industry member. Thanks, Kevin. No industry member or licensee shall enter into any agreement, including any unwritten agreement which causes undue influence over another licensee or industry member. And we also added some language here that the rule shall not be construed as prohibiting the placing and accepting of orders for the purchase and delivery of cannabis that are made in accordance with usual and common business practices for up to 5 retail cannabis licenses. So that directly relates to the legislation or the clarification of the legislation around the maximum of 5 retail locations. So this is new. This is all new language. It's all in blue. It's all underlined under prohibited practices. So this is a new number 2, preferential pricing of cannabis, usable cannabis, cannabis-infused products, or cannabis concentrates sold by processors to cannabis retailers is prohibited. Any cannabis, usable cannabis, cannabis-infused products, or cannabis concentrates sold by a processor to a cannabis retailer must be made available and sold under the same basic terms and conditions to all cannabis retailers. For purposes of this section, preferential pricing means product pricing offered to cannabis retailers that are not offered to all retailers. And then to go on, there is a new section 3 related to exclusivity agreements. So the new 3 is exclusivity agreements between a processor and a retailer are prohibited. For purposes of this section, an exclusivity agreement is an agreement between a processor and a retailer that excludes or prevents a retailer from purchasing cannabis products from another processor, or excludes or prevents a processor from selling their product to another retailer, or creates white label or private label products. And then for purposes of this section, white label or private label products means products packaged and sold by a processor to a retailer with a label that includes the retailer's own branding or logo, or an exclusive product, brand, or logo created for the retailer that is not made available to all retailers. And then this also includes any violation of this subsection is subject to the same penalties established for engaging in prohibited practices under WAC 314.55.523. And then continuing in WAC section 314.55.018, because there are new sections, there's some renumbering. And then clarification or definition around discounts has been added. A discount, which means a reduction made from a regular or list price, and then also consignment sales were added under that no producer or processor shall advance and no cannabis license shall receive money or money's worth under an agreement or by means of any other business practice or arrangement such that these are not permitted. Okay, let's see. All right. So that's the end of the changes in 314.55.018. And I see a question in the chat from Sean. And we will keep that question in our documentation. I'm not planning on answering like enforcement questions today, but we can definitely make sure that our enforcement folks see your comment and your question about that as we move forward. And then, of course, the newest, most recent Gov delivery that our enforcement group sent out does have information about the legislation, and then also links to a mechanism for filing complaints. And I can put that in the chat also. Let me see, that was up here. I'll put that in the chat. So now we're moving on to 314.55.035, qualifying for cannabis license. And so right at the beginning, there's some clarification around a true party of interest. True parties of interest must qualify to be listed on the license and meet residency requirements consistent with this chapter. And then also using some language from the legislation, a person or entity with a financial interest in a license qualifies as a true party of interest. And then additional parts of this WAC section. There's a table in that section related to entity and true parties of interest, and we have amended that section to add another row. Here, I'm going to take a quick sip of water here. Okay. To add that any entity or entities or persons with a financial interest in a license, all persons and entities with a financial interest as defined in this section qualify as a true party of interest. And again, we're just adding a row to this true party of interest table. And then we go on further to clarify under subsection 2, a person, entity, or married couple may not be a true party of interest, which includes having a financial interest in more than 5 retail licenses, more than 3 producer licenses, or more than 3 processor licenses. And under section 3, this has been broken out to new section 3. A person or entity or married couple may not be a true party of interest in a cannabis retailer license and a cannabis producer license, or a cannabis retailer license and a cannabis processor license, or any cannabis license and a certified testing laboratory. And then some renumbering for new number 4. The following definitions apply to this chapter unless the context clearly indicates otherwise. So we have in the draft rules a new definition for, or a modified definition for, what control means. And control means any person or entity, whether they are named on the license or not, with the power or authority to direct or cause the direction of the management or policies of a licensed business, qualifies as a true party of interest. And then some examples. Control includes, but is not limited to, directing or having the authority to direct the core or executive functions of the business, such as making business decisions and having oversight of the business. This includes, but is not limited to, making purchasing decisions, negotiating contracts and agreements, drafting, recommending, or pre-approving business policies, procedures, and marketing plans, directing uniform branding between multiple stores, and making hiring and other personnel decisions. This language does try to incorporate some of the comments that we heard after the last stakeholder sessions. That is a good question. Thank you, Sean. Will those deemed in control and not on the license be required to be named on the license? Thank you. That's a good question that we can clarify in as we move forward. We'd also be interested in people's comments on some of these activities that are included under control. So any of the actions described in this subsection constitutes having control, notwithstanding the terms of any contract or agreement entered into by the parties. And then references to any arrangement between two or more licensees as a consulting agreement does not preclude the board's determination of control based on the criteria in this definition. And now we go on to kind of clarify some of the language around financial interest from the legislation. Again, also we'd be interested in people's input on some of this language either today or after today's session. So financial interest means to, as a definition for this, to gain or have the opportunity to gain a financial benefit or business advantage resulting from a business relationship or agreement with a cannabis licensee. Financial interest includes, but is not limited to, receiving a share of profits or revenue or the right to receive profits or revenue, any assisting with, coordinating, or recommending the purchase of cannabis products whereupon pricing is coordinated. And coordinated pricing includes, but is not limited to, centralized pricing or placing orders across stores. And number 3, any sharing of or the common use of intellectual property assets such as branding, trade names, logos, social media accounts or websites. And you'll see that a lot of this language is similar to what was in the legislation. A new number 4, providing any operational support for the typical day-to-day business operations. So in the legislation, one section combined operational support and operational control in the legislation. The control piece was put into the new definition of control that we reviewed a few minutes ago. And then this section focuses on operational support that was called out in the legislation. Providing operational support for typical day-to-day business operations. This includes, but is not limited to, assisting with or advising the licensee in day-to-day operations, such as communicating with and paying vendors, setting and posting retail prices, scheduling and managing personnel, maintenance of the store, and conducting marketing and advertising activities. Okay, I see we have some comments in the chat. Thank you. From Micah Sherman, do the updates around control apply to both retail and wholesale licensees? As we have it now, it applies to both. You see, would negotiating a lower price based on a volume purchase be prohibited under these rules? The way that we have it now, no. If you're negotiating for a lower price for volume purchase, if it's being done for 5 or less stores, it is not prohibited. The right to be allowed a business deduction or loss should also trigger one as a TPI. Okay, thank you, Sean, for that comment. Would negotiating and specifically lower pricing if available to everyone statewide on the same terms. For example, anyone who spends 10,000. I'm just reading the comments that are in the section in the chat. Gets X price. Spend 5,000, get X price, etc. Our volume or bulk discounts are specifically prohibited. In the draft that we have here, they're not. Bulk pricing must be allowed for those who own 5 stores. We will need to discuss these rules. This will impact social equity and other stores. And this is from Paula. Okay, thank you for your Thank you for putting in comments in the chat. We thought there may be some discussion around this, so that's helpful. And then, I think I already shared this last one about coordinating marketing and advertising. And 6, just continuing on under the definition of financial interest in the rules, any coordination or sharing of employment or hiring decisions, including the shared employment of individuals. This includes coordinated or shared hiring, firing, training, management, human resources, or payroll of personnel. And finally, any actions listed in the subsection constitute having a financial interest, notwithstanding the terms of any contract or agreement entered into by the parties. So let's see, there's another comment here. Are liquor sales allowed bulk pricing discounts to their retail outlets? As I'm not a liquor rules expert, so I believe they are. If anybody else from LCB wants to put that in there, to clarify that would be great. But I do believe that they are. Oops. Okay, so for the purposes of this chapter, true party of interest does not include. So we added some exclusions or clarified some exclusions in the next section of 314-55035. So there's no changes on this section. This is just the intro. And I'm moving my cat move. A person or entity contracting with the licensee to receive a commission for the sale of the business or real estate property. Okay, so let's just go back up here. So for the purposes of this chapter, true party of interest does not include, and this is a non-exclusive list, and we just clarified some and added some. A consultant who receives a flat or hourly rate compensation under a written contractual agreement, provided compensation is not tied to sales or profits. And then a new E is an industry member who is participating as a mentor pursuant to RCW 43-330-540 to applicants and licensees through the Department of Commerce Technical Assistance Grant Program for Social Equity licensees. And this just is some renumbering. A new G, any business, entity, or person with a contract or agreement who provides services for a licensed business unrelated to management agreements or intellectual property agreements specified in RCW 6950-325, such as property or building maintenance, security, cleaning, or accounting, or an accounting company, provided compensation is not tied to sales or profits, will not be considered a true party of interest, as long as the licensee retains the right to and controls the business. And then also an addition of employees as defined in 314-55010, which is an existing definition. Let's see. I'm just looking at the chat. We call this the Costco module. And then Kevin added in 314-23-080 was the liquor rules. Okay, thank you. just checking that out. And so just continuing on, we're still in 314-55035. And now we're in the notification section. This took out some cross-referencing that wasn't applicable anymore. 314-55. So under notification, a new B, any agreement entered into between a licensee and a service provider must be disclosed to the board. This includes any management agreements or any agreements as referenced in 6950-395. These both are from the legislation. Agreements disclosed to the board are for reference and record keeping and are not approved by the board. Disclosure agreements and intellectual property. This is just continuing on with the notification. Licensed cannabis businesses may enter into agreements consistent with the provisions of RCW 6950-395. Any agreement under this RCW must not involve having a financial interest or exercising control across more than 5 retail licenses. And now we're moving on to 314-55050, which is a new section or a different section. This is related to withdrawal, denial, suspension, or cancellation of a cannabis license. So there's a new B under this. So we have A, and a new B is owning, operating, or having a financial interest in more than 5 cannabis retail licenses, more than 3 producer licenses, or more than 3 processor licenses. And this gets back to, I always have to go back. This gets back to the board has the discretion to withdraw, deny, suspend, or cancel a cannabis license application or license consistent with RCW 6950-331 for reasons including, but not limited to, the following: owning, operating, or having a financial interest in more than 5 retail licenses, more than 3 producer licenses, or more than 3 processor licenses. Any cumulative ownership violation under this section will result in penalties under RCW 314-55-523 for each license location, which may be aggravated for intentional violations of this subsection. Okay, that's the only change for this 314-55-050. And then I see another question: is an LCB approved financier considered a financial interest? Thanks for having that in there. I'm not sure I can respond to that right now, but we will look at that question moving forward. Thank you. So now we're moving on to another section, 314-55-079. This is cannabis retailer license privileges, requirements, and fees. And these last couple of sections don't have a lot of changes. The board may accept applications for cannabis retail licenses at timeframes. So this just describes all of the requirements for a cannabis retail license. And this includes some clarifying language around any person or entity may not be a true party of interest, including having a financial interest, as defined in this chapter, in more than 5 retail cannabis licenses. So that's just clarifying that from the legislation. And just making a change here, a cannabis retailer may transport product to other locations owned by the licensee. So this is just the long list of the requirements for retailer license. So those are the only changes to that section. And then we're moving on to our last section, WAC section with changes. WAC 314-55087, record keeping requirements for cannabis licensees. And we have just one change, one area where there's changes and then some renumbering. So cannabis licensees are responsible to keep records. The following records must be kept and maintained on the licensed premises for 5-year time period and available for inspection. And this includes purchase invoices, to include items or services purchased, from whom the items or services were purchased, and then also a new addition, all agreements identified in RCW 695325 to include the parties involved in the agreement, the scope, duration of the agreement, and the date. So those are all the changes, additions and deletions from the draft rules. So I'm going to look in the chat here. If you have 5 stores, can you finance for a 6th? Okay, thank you for that question, James. And comment, we will look at addressing that more as we move forward. So I'd like to open it up for any discussion or comments. If you'd like to raise your hand and make a comment, we can go back to any of the sections if you'd like to look back at them. I can just go ahead and move on to the concluding slides. Might as well. Okay, let's do that. I joined late. Is this recorded for download? Yes. Thank you, James. We will post these, the recording of this session, and then also the recording of next Tuesday's session on our website. And you can find information about this rulemaking, all of the details about this rulemaking, and then where you can find the recordings. I just put in a link to our current rulemaking activity page. Oh, okay, Adam. Looks like Adam has his hand up. Tierney, would you mind unmuting Adam for us?
Yep, go ahead, Adam. You should be able to talk.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, yeah.
Hey, just a quick clarifying question on the bulk that you guys said is allowed. Is that based on one specific? It's not over time, I assume, right? It's not like buy over a course of a month. It's buy today for, and is it based on one individual license, or is it based on my 4 or 5 licenses? Is it like, it's basically up to 5, right? Or is it's looked at on each individual license basis? Those are my questions.
Correct. Not over time. I think we have language in there for that, but and yeah, it's up to 5 licenses, up to 5 licenses. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's what the current rules allow.
Thank you. That makes sense. If you can own up to 5, you should be able to negotiate for up to your 5. So that makes sense. Thank you for that.
Yes, you're welcome. But if other people have comments about that too. Under existing previous laws and rules were bulk discounts allowed. This is a question from Shay, and that is part of the reason that we have some of the clarifying language in there around discounts. Let's go back up to that section, shall we? Let's do that. I don't have that other section there. So previously, this is in section 018. No cannabis or producer processor shall advance, and no licensee shall receive money or money's worth under agreement written or otherwise by means of any other business practice arrangements such as gifts, discounts, and we are putting in some clarifying language around discounts and consignment sales. So that's why we are attempting to clarify some language around discounts. Oh, go ahead, Shay. If you could unmute Shay Tierney.
That didn't answer my question. Under existing rules prior to this legislation, was a retailer A allowed to buy product at, $5 for 100 units, and retailer B could buy them for $3 for 1,000 units? Is bulk discounting currently allowed prior to this?
There was a lot of discussion about this at our last session, and I think there was some confusion. Justin, do you want to have any thoughts
I know there's
around
been
that?
massive enforcement on this, and there's been a ton of producer processors have been told it's not allowed and have received, notices to correct. And so I'm just curious if this is a backtrack or if y'all have changed your position on that.
I think, well, go ahead. Justin, did you want to comment on this, please?
Sure. Under current rules, discounts are prohibited, and it wasn't really well defined. And so with the statutory changes, there's some inferences to discounts. And so we're trying to provide additional clarification around what that means. So volume discounting isn't necessarily prohibited, but anything would have, in these rules, anything would have to be on the same terms and conditions for all licensees. And so, yes, you couldn't do this over time. You'd have to do it on an order up to your 5-store limitation. But we're not, so the law is identifying that discounts are allowed. However, we're trying to define kind of what that looks like and means in this particular rule set. So obviously, please provide comments on that. And we'll take a look at those as we continue to develop the rule set.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Justin. And then Justin also included response to the question about financier is defined in 314-55010. If a financier, I can't say that word, has a financial interest as defined in RCW 6950-325, then they would not be allowed to be a financier in more than 5 retail licenses. So thank you, Justin, for that. Go ahead, Tierney, would you mind unmuting Shay for us, please?
I just want to make it clear that it seems that bulk discounts are not currently allowed from what I'm hearing, and this change would allow for it. I just want to put it on the record that I think it'd be really detrimental to a lot of the small producers and processors and really fuel the race to the bottom, a lot of the issues that we're already seeing in the industry. And it's pretty wild to see that the interpretation of this management agreement bill and the word discount in it is being interpreted as allowing volume discounts. I think there's a lot of concern around that in the industry. So I just want to bring that up and make that point.
Yes, thank you. No, I appreciate you being clear about your comments about that. That's helpful. And thank you, Micah, for putting in some information in the chat and additional comments in the chat from Jonathan. Thank you. Unless anyone else wants to raise their hand. Oh, go ahead. I see Micah has his hand up. Tierney, could you unmute Micah for us?
Yeah, thanks. So I think it's pretty clear from everything I just put in the chat that volume discounts are not currently allowed under the law or the rule. This bill did not address the term volume discounts. It just said the word discount. So that does not mean that we should all of a sudden assume that that means this bill is intended to create volume discounting. There's lots of things that we can sell a product for less than we normally sell it for without requiring the store buy a certain amount of it, which is a prohibited practice under the other aspects of the statute. So you can't tie the discount to the purchase of something else, which means you can't tie the discount to the volume. So bulk discounts are not allowed under the statute. They're not allowed under the rule. This bill did not specifically address that issue, and it does not give you the statutory authority to change it in this rulemaking.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Tierney, would you mind unmuting Paula for us?
Go ahead, Paula. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Thank you. I'm dealing with some allergies. I could not more vehemently disagree with Micah. I think that there are volume discounts are implied. I think that we can address this in the rulemaking. And if people want to have a different opinion, then they can go back to the legislature next January and argue legislative intent, and they can pass a different bill. If you have 5 stores, and I represent a lot of social equity clients and a lot of other folks, you have 5 stores and people need to be able to buy in volume for their stores. And so what I don't want us to do in this rulemaking is to create something that is arbitrary and capricious that will be struck down. I'm a small business. I can buy in volume from Costco for my business. We should not be treating marijuana differently. So I think that's a conversation that we need to have and have in earnest during this rulemaking process. But one person doesn't speak for the entire industry, and thank you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate everyone being clear on their point of view for this. That's very helpful for us. Okay, thank you. Jason, did you want to speak, or I saw your hand up and then no? I'm assuming you took it down. Does anyone else have any other comments they'd like to share verbally? Oh, go, Tierney, could you unmute Jason for us, please?
Jason, go ahead. I can tell that you're trying to talk, but we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Just wanted to follow up on the last comment made. The reality is this industry for, since its inception has not allowed for those volume discounts. And I just push back on the corollary example of Costco because, we're in a highly regulated market with no vertical integration, and there's only, a set number of retail stores. That paradigm in of itself changes that dynamic and makes the comparison to something like Costco an apples to oranges comparison. The concern from small businesses about the volume discounting is that it continues to put more and more leverage into the power of the retailers, which that leverage is already proven to be detrimental to the industry over and over again through not only practices that elicit volume discounting, but also through manipulation of prices at the retail level, such as 40 and 50% off entire stores. So I just want to push back on any notion that we should be comparing ourselves to a more traditional model of retail business such as Costco.
Thank you, Jason. And Tierney, would you mind unmuting Paula for us?
Thank you. And I stand by my comments as the architect of social equity, both 2870, 5080, and somebody that co-chaired the social equity task force. It is going to be extraordinarily difficult for those people that have been systemically left out due to the war on drugs to purchase at a rate that is fair if they can't do volume discounts. A lot of these folks are coming together and they're using their purchasing power. What we're talking about is systemic and structural racism here. And so it's the same thing with the retailers that have 5 stores. And so if you get 4 or 5 of these stores together and they're able to purchase and negotiate a better price, they have been struggling for the past decade and a half to enter the market. We know that for a new entrant into the market, it is exceedingly difficult. So these aren't things that we're making up for a whim. These are things that we've looked at, not just in this state, but in other states. We don't do vertical integration in Washington State because we don't want to. So there are hundreds of retail licenses coming on board under the policies that we've been pushing out since 2020. And we are going to argue, very, 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 very strongly for the volume discount. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paula. We have another question in the chat. If a person is employed by another retailer that has 5 stores, can that person help another retailer do security work or advisory services? It is my understanding that this would not qualify as TPI. In the current rules, the draft rules that we have, yeah, we can look at that question to make sure that that is clear. There's another question from Brandon Park. So thanks, Tran, for putting that question in there. Like I said, we're keeping track of all the questions in the chat. Brandon, how many social equity licenses exist today? I do not have a number on that. Maybe one of my LCB colleagues could put that in the chat. I don't know the answer to that question. And then does 5403 say discounts aren't allowed for more than 5 stores? Yes, that's our interpretation, that 5403 says that discounts are allowed up to 5 stores, but not more. That's the basis for these draft rules, that interpretation. And then Sean, pooling stores and negotiating prices is not allowed. Pooling licensees together for negotiation would be like setting up TPIs between them. Okay, thank you for that comment in the chat. Tierney, would you mind unmuting Shay for us?
I just want to point out that a lot of these social equity licenses are one-off stores. Maybe they have 2, and those are the exact type of stores that would be put at a disadvantage by allowing for bulk discounting, because a store that has 3 or 4 or 5 would be able to leverage those to get better pricing, which is why we see people on the call who have up to 5 stores excited about this type of rule. So, in regards to social equity and in regards to those licensees and how do we support them, as someone who's been in cannabis retail for 15 years, a lot of these folks have one store. I've spoken with a number of them as well. So that's great that you're hearing from your clients, Paula. But I know a lot of these folks have single stores and they're concerned about not being able to compete. So I just, no one voice speaks for everyone in the industry, and that kind of goes both ways. And I just want to point out that a lot of those stores are single store owners and would be put at a disadvantage as a result.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Shay. Okay, Gregory Foster put in some social equity licensees as of March 10th. I'm assuming that came from our website somewhere. Thank you. Okay, thanks for the other information in the chat. Appreciate that. Any other comments that people want to offer verbally today? I do appreciate hearing all the perspectives on these issues. That helps us for sure. Let's see. And then Micah, discounts that create undue influence are not allowed, which is what the debate around allowable and disallowed practices rests. This is why we need a trade practices clearly outlined. Yep, thank you. Thank you for that comment. We'll be looking back at the chat comments too. So anyone else who wants to weigh in on the chat, that's also helpful for us to keep track of. So moving forward, since I don't see anybody else raising their hand, to reiterate, email comments or questions to our rules team at rules@lcb.wa.gov. If possible, we're looking to get written comments from folks on this most recent draft rule language by April 17th. That would really be helpful. And then information and materials related to this rulemaking is at our LCB current rulemaking activity page. I put that I posted that in the chat. Okay, there's some additional comments. Can you point to the statutory language that the LCB is basing their assumption that belt distance are allowed? Well, we are trying to clarify, Jonathan, in the legislation. Let's go back up. And it's the language related to, oh, I guess I can't highlight it. Discounted is in the B under the new section 2 under B for the definition of financial interest. And it talks about discounted, whereupon pricing is coordinated or discounted. And that is some of the language that we're looking at. So let's continue. Let's just finish up here. So next steps, we are continuing to collect and considering your feedback. After that, we would finalize our draft rule language. And once we have that, where we feel like we have addressed and incorporated comments, relate vis-a-vis the legislation, we would then file or bring to the board to approve a CR 102, which would be the official rule proposal with the proposed rule language. Right now, we are tentatively looking at bringing that to the board at their May 6th board meeting. this depends on the feedback that we get and, internal discussion and around this. If we did that, the notice would be published in the Washington State Register on May 20th. There'd be a public hearing that would be tentatively scheduled for June 11th. If that goes well and we don't need to make substantial changes to the rule, we would bring the final rule adoption to the board at the July 1 board meeting. Oh, do you see I had a little question there for Kevin? He told me just to highlight this as tentative. I forgot to take out the question mark. And then notice would be published in the Washington State Register on July 15th, and then rules would become effective 31 days after. So that is the tentative timeline that we're working on right now. And that is it. Thank you very much for attending today. I'm going to put our survey link in the chat. If you wouldn't mind taking our survey today and just giving us some feedback about how it went today for you, and then just a little bit about yourself, what who you're representing, or how you learned about this stakeholder session. That would be very helpful. And again, all of our rulemaking information about this rulemaking, where we post all of the materials related to this rulemaking, and all of our rulemaking that's currently open is at our current rulemaking activity webpage. But we'd appreciate any input on the survey. And then again, just email us additional comments at rules@lcb.wa.gov. And we look forward to hearing from you. And maybe we'll see some of you at our stakeholder session next Tuesday, which is, go back up to the top because I can't remember when it is. It's next Tuesday, 1 to 3. And we'll be going over these same slides. And that's it. If anybody has any other questions, I think that we are done today. Thank you very much. Thanks very much for joining us.